college football writer. And Bill, thanks so much for joining us. Before we jump into football, before we talk Syracuse UConn, I know you got a new book coming out. Tell us about it.
For Progress, the definitive guide to the future of college football, which is a very lofty title. I don't know if anything is definitive, but felt like a good time to write about just the 38 different ways that football has changed in recent years and what we can make of it, where we think things are going.
So before we jump into Syracuse UConn,
where is it going?
Where is it going? And I guess specifically with the ACC, we've seen that the top teams in the conference have been unhappy for a while. The conference is doing its best to keep everybody happy and kind of change the rules and how they divvy up all the money. What do you think ultimately happens with the ACC?
I mean, it's a very good question. And I do think, they bent over backwards to keep teams that wouldn't stay if they had an offer anyway. So I wasn't really sure about the ACC going in that direction. But, we're in a period now where I think things will be semi-stable until kind of the 2030 range, when a bunch of TV contracts all kind of start to come up at once. And if we see some big move after that, if the ACC splinters in some way, that's about when it'll happen. I haven't decided quite yet what I think is most likely in that scenario. But yeah, we got at least a couple years apiece.
If they do go to a super league, and we've heard that in the past, right? Where does that leave a program like Syracuse?
Yeah.
Is Syracuse a program that's, I guess a top 48 program? Let's say it goes to, 48 schools. Do they have a seat at the table? Do they have a chair when the music stops in the game of musical chairs?
Well, the thing about all the talk about super leagues and whatnot is, and this is something I touch on in the book, we're kind of there already. Yes, the SEC and Big Ten are, deigning to allow a Big 12 team and an ACC team and a Group of 5 team into the playoff, but they already secured all the money. So they already have most of what they want right now. Obviously, there are a few more brands that they might try to get to expand their reach a little further, but I don't know if I believe. It would almost be that the Big Ten and SEC have to give up some level of power and money and influence if we were to get to a Super League situation. I don't think they're necessarily interested in that.
That's a really good point. All right, let's talk football now. And we finally, after all this talk about build up to a new season, we finally have seen pretty much everybody play at least once, including Syracuse. What were your takeaways from that Syracuse-Tennessee game? What did the stats, I guess, say to you about that Syracuse-Tennessee game and this Orange squad in general?
Yeah, it was a confusing game from a Syracuse perspective because obviously they were a little overwhelmed. Tennessee just had more depth and athleticism and experience, for that matter. But then for 5 or 10 minutes at a time, Syracuse would look pretty solid. And I was I didn't know I had a couple different impressions of Syracuse in that game, but I'm happy that they're playing UConn this coming weekend. UConn's a really, really solid team that actually has a decent amount of explosiveness, or at least, they did against Central Connecticut. And so we're going to learn about Syracuse more than we did. Maybe it's just that Syracuse is set up to be a really young and inconsistent and up and down team, but there was a little upside there. And if they handle UConn, I think that's a really good sign.
All right, your SP plus rankings actually have UConn slightly higher than Syracuse. So can you, I guess for our listeners and for us too, explain kind of what goes into these rankings, what's taken into account, and what gives UConn, the slight edge at this moment over Syracuse?
Yeah, so in season, it's basically opponent adjusted, tempo adjusted, a measure of the sustainable aspects of college football, we'll say. Funky bounces will determine games, random big plays will determine games, but it's an effort to try to get to what you can actually maintain from week to week. At this point in the season, obviously it's over 90% preseason projections, which, were relatively unfriendly to Syracuse just because the history before the last season wasn't great, lost a ton of production, those kinds of things. So, they're pretty uncertain right now. It's just a little bit based on last week. And right now, it appears that UConn and Syracuse are a little even, but we'll see.
You said a moment ago that UConn is a really solid team, and I think when the schedule first came out, the knee-jerk reaction for Syracuse fans is, well, UConn's a win, Colgate's a win. You're trying to find wins, but this is not the UConn program from 5 years ago. I mean, Jim Mora, they won 9 games last year. They went to a bowl game. They won a bowl game. They've got some guys back, including their starting quarterback. What, I guess, impresses you the most about the Huskies, and maybe what is most concerning if you're an Orange fan going into this game?
Yeah, I mean, they legitimately improved last year. The first year that Mora was there, they went 6-7, but they won some close games. It wasn't very sustainable on paper, and they fell apart the next year. But yeah, 9 games last year, they were 67th in SP+. They were 60th on defense. And you combine that with, a nicely experienced receiving core, experience at quarterback. The defense got hit pretty hard by attrition, but I did like some of the transfers they brought in. So just kind of feels like they're building. I know it's not really technically a G5 team because they're indies, but just they've built a kind of solid mid-major there. It seems like they've got really solid talent.
Looking at your SP stuff in the ACC, what happens to a school like North Carolina after what happened, with Bill Belichick's first game?
Yeah, they fell a long way is what happened. I think 24 spots from the week before. That's kind of justifiable. They actually fell way more than TCU rose, which I found was interesting. But we've gotten a few reminders over the last couple of years that it's really hard to build sturdy lines in the transfer portal on a discount. That's kind of what North Carolina tried to do this offseason, and it did not look good at all. Those lines got overwhelmed by what should be a good TCU team, but definitely probably not an amazing TCU team.
One more team in the ACC is the Clemson. We've had multiple guests on that said they were their national championship pick. They lost their first game. Would you be worried after seeing their offense in week 1?
Yes. No, I was a big Clemson skeptic heading into the season. They haven't been explosive on offense since 2020. They had a couple of long passes against Texas when they were trailing, and that was all we were going off of really last season. So I was skeptical about the offense. The run defense actually improved, which might be a good sign moving forward. But yeah, no, this has not been a very consistent and explosive offense in recent years. And that's kind of what we saw, especially, going up against elite athleticism. They don't match up very well.
You talked about teams that moved up or down in your SP Plus rankings. Are there any teams that are higher in your SP Plus rankings than what the voters have them as, or the coaches have them as, and vice versa? Is there anybody that's that shows up lower in your rankings than maybe the public or the voters are thinking right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the top of the ACC might be a little bit of a surprise right now. We've got Miami at 10th. The next team on the list is Louisville currently at 20. Clemson fell a good amount after last week's game. They'll probably rebound here as they get their footing in the coming weeks. But right now, I don't know if we're talking enough about how explosive Louisville is. This is a year where almost nobody's making any big plays. Everybody's going into a cover 2 shell and making you dink and dunk. Louisville still has massive big play potential, and that might end up making a huge difference.
Bill Connelly from ESPN joining us here for another couple of minutes. Bill, any other trends, I guess, stand out to you? I was reading one thing that said that if you bet the under blindly, just bet the under in every game, it hit like 68% or some crazy number. Did anything stand out to you like that from week 1?
Yeah, it was like 17-3 at one point on Saturday. It was incredible. But no, that is the most interesting thing by far, because defenses are often ahead of offenses at the beginning of the season. I think they under hit like 61% of the time last year, but this was a whole different level, and scoring was down like 4 points per game if you're just looking at FBS versus FBS games. I think we're in a period here where tempo's down, big plays are down likely because of what defenses are doing and making you try to move 3, 4, 5 yards at a time. And it's really impacting games. I mean, it was 14-7 Ohio State, Texas. 17-10 LSU, Clemson? It was wild. And I don't know. I'm here for points. I prefer 37-30. So hopefully offenses get this figured out.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Just say Bill's new book, Forward Progress, The Definitive Guide to the Future of College Football, released yesterday. Where can people find it?
Definitely Amazon.com. I know that. I need to go out in the wild and try to find it in Barnes & Nobles, but I think they're there too. But that's you just goose that algorithm at Amazon right now, try to bump it up those lists.
All right, Bill. Really good stuff. We appreciate you coming on. Good luck with the book, and hopefully we can have you on talking college football again down the road.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. Bill Connelly from ESPN joining us here on the show. And with that, we'll hit a timeout. We'll open up the phone lines for the rest of hour number 1, 315-437-7644. We're back after this on ESPN Radio.
I don't want to wear